The silent arrival. The quantum sensors across the Orient Collective's border outposts registered the anomaly simultaneously. A massive object had just emerged from hyperspace, its sudden appearance sending ripples through the carefully monitored fabric of spacetime. First Admiral Zixtal of the Collective Defense Force felt his primary heart skip a beat as the readings flooded his neural interface. The vessel that had appeared was unlike anything recorded in the Collective's extensive archives. The ship, if it could even be called that, stretched nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it, covered in geometric patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid shadow. But what truly set it apart wasn't its size or its unusual appearance. It was the complete absence of any known form of propulsion system. "Status report," Zixtal commanded, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light of nearby holographic displays. "Sir," his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vela, responded immediately. "The vessel appears to be holding position at the edge of the Carina defense perimeter. No weapons signatures detected, but, sir, our sensors can't penetrate their hull. It's as if the scanning beams simply cease to exist when they make contact." The bridge of the CDF flagship Eternal Vigilance hummed with tension as more data streamed in. 12 different species had already declared states of emergency, and the Collective Council was convening an emergency session. Whatever this vessel was, its mere presence threatened to upend centuries of carefully maintained galactic order. "Sir," the communications officer's voice cut through the tension, "we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast on all known frequencies, including several we thought impossible to utilize simultaneously." Zixtal straightened his posture, his secondary arms instinctively moving to adjust his ceremonial sash. "Put it through." The message that filled the bridge was disarmingly simple, delivered in perfect collective standard. "Greetings, citizens of the Orient Collective. We are the United Earth Federation vessel Stellaris, seeking peaceful contact. We apologize if our arrival has caused concern. We come bearing both warning and hope." The silence that followed was deafening. Humanity, the species that the Collective's early survey ships had dismissed as primitive tool users, barely worth noting just 3 centuries ago. The same species that had gone dark 50 years ago, leading many to assume they had destroyed themselves like so many young civilizations before them. "Sir," Vela's voice was barely a whisper. "Historical records indicate that when humanity was last observed, they were still using chemical rockets to reach their own satellite. This level of advancement, it should be impossible." Zixtal's secondary heart began beating faster as he processed the implications. No species in recorded history had ever made such a technological leap in so short a time. Even more troubling was the mention of a warning. What could drive a species to achieve such advancement in mere centuries? "First Admiral," the sensor officer called out, "we're detecting unusual quantum fluctuations around their hull. The patterns suggest—" "Sir, I believe they're using space itself as a propulsion system. They're literally folding reality around themselves." Before Zixtal could respond, a second transmission arrived. "We request permission to send a small diplomatic shuttle to your flagship. Our representatives are prepared to explain everything. Time, unfortunately, is of the essence." The First Admiral felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Standard protocol dictated that unknown vessels should be quarantined and studied from a distance before any direct contact was permitted. But something told him that humanity's arrival marked the beginning of a new era for the Collective, whether they were ready or not. "Signal our acceptance," he ordered, surprising even himself with the steadiness in his voice. "And notify the Council that I'm initiating first contact procedures." As preparations began for the historic meeting, Zixtal couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's advancement wasn't merely about engineering prowess or scientific breakthrough. The Stellaris itself seemed to defy the fundamental laws of physics that the Collective had based their civilization upon. Whatever drove humanity to achieve such feats in so short a time, whatever warning they carried with them across the stars, he suspected it would reshape the galaxy forever. The diplomatic shuttle that departed the Stellaris was another display of impossible engineering. Unlike the massive flagship, it was elegant and small, yet it moved with the same reality-bending propulsion. As it approached the Eternal Vigilance, Zixtal observed how it seemed to glide through space, as if the normal rules of motion simply didn't apply. In the minutes before the shuttle's arrival, he received a preliminary briefing on the human representatives. They had voluntarily provided biological data, showing a remarkable understanding of collective protocols. The information revealed something else that sent whispers through his command staff. The humans had extensively modified themselves, blending organic and technological elements in ways that the collective had long considered taboo. The galaxy was about to change, and Zixtal found himself wondering if they were truly ready for what humanity had become. Echoes of war. The council chamber of the Eternal Vigilance had never felt so small. Despite its vaulted ceilings and sweeping views of space, the presence of the human delegation seemed to compress the very air. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber, her augmented eyes catching the light in ways that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The nanite patterns beneath her skin formed subtle, shifting geometries that mirrored the hull of the distant Stellaris. "What you're describing is impossible," declared High Counselor Engstera, his bioluminescent patches flaring with agitation. "No force could consume entire galaxies without leaving traces we would detect." Chen's expression remained neutral, but the holographic display behind her shifted, showing a time-lapse of darkness threading across multiple galaxy clusters. The void, as we call them, doesn't leave traces because they don't just destroy. They unmake. They operate on principles that violate what you understand as physical law. First Admiral Zixtal, watching from his command position, noticed how the human's augmentations briefly pulsed as she spoke of the void. Fear, or something else. The meeting had been running for 6 hours, and with each passing moment, the scale of the threat humanity described became more terrifying. 3 centuries ago, Chen continued, we detected the first signs. Entire galaxy clusters going dark in patterns that couldn't be natural. Our scientists discovered that space itself was being consumed. That's when we began our great transformation. A holographic display shifted again, showing the evolution of human technology. From primitive fission drives to their first stumbling attempts at FTL, then a sudden, explosive leap forward. The images showed humans gradually integrating with their technology, rebuilding themselves and their civilization from the ground up. We had to evolve, Chen explained, her voice carrying a weight that even the translator matrices couldn't fully convey. Not just our technology, but ourselves. We had to break past the limitations of organic computing, had to merge with our creations to process the calculations needed to understand the void. The Stellaris isn't just a ship, it's humanity's answer to an impossible enemy. Sub-Commander Vela leaned forward, her sensor arrays fully extended. Your ship's hull, it's not just armored, is it? Chen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both warm and unsettling. The geometric patterns you see are actually 4-dimensional quantum computers, running calculations that allow us to manipulate space-time itself. Every surface of the Stellaris is thinking, processing, calculating how to bend reality in ways that might give us an edge against the void. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Quantum computing at that scale violated dozens of theoretical limits the collective had established. Yet the evidence was impossible to ignore. Humanity had achieved it, along with countless other technological miracles, all in the span of a few centuries. Why come to us? Zixtal finally asked the question that had been nagging at him. If your technology is so advanced, what do you need from the collective? Chen's augmented eyes seemed to look through him, past flesh and crystal to something deeper. Because we've learned that technology alone isn't enough. The void, it's not just consuming space and matter. It's consuming possibility itself. Each galaxy it takes reduces the number of potential futures where life can exist. We need allies who can help us think differently, who can show us new ways of understanding reality. She gestured, and a holographic display showed a map of the local galactic cluster. We estimate we have 50 years before the void reaches this region of space. Alone, humanity might survive longer. The Stellaris was built to be our ark, capable of sustaining our species for millennia if necessary. But we didn't come here to run. We came here to make a stand. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The collective, with its centuries of stable governance and careful technological advancement, was being asked to join in a war against an enemy that defied comprehension. An enemy that humanity had transformed itself to fight. "There's something else you should know," Chen added, her voice softening. "The void, it's attracted to complexity, to civilizations that achieve certain technological thresholds. The collective is approaching that threshold now. Whether you join us or not, it will come for you eventually. The only question is whether we face it together or separately." Zixtal watched as the council members processed this information. The political implications alone were staggering. Accepting humanity's warning would mean acknowledging that the collective's careful approach to technological advancement might have been a mistake. It would mean accepting that their new neighbors had achieved in centuries what the collective had deemed impossible in millennia. But as he studied the shifting patterns on the Stellaris's distant hull, visible through the chamber's viewport, he realized humanity had already changed everything simply by arriving. Their existence proved that the universe was stranger and more terrible than the collective had imagined. And perhaps more wonderful too. The proving ground. The alert came without warning. Deep space sensors detected a massive quantum disturbance at the edge of collective space, far from any established trade routes or colonies. First Admiral Zixtal felt a chill run through his crystalline form as the readings appeared eerily similar to those that had heralded the Stellaris's arrival. But this was different. Where the human vessel had emerged with surgical precision, this tear in spacetime was ragged, violent. Multiple contacts emerging. Sub-Commander Vela reported, her sensor arrays vibrating with tension. Configuration unknown. They're not matching any records in the collective database. The diplomatic shuttle that had brought Ambassador Chen back to the Eternal Vigilance suddenly came alive with activity. The human's augmented eyes were rapidly shifting through spectrums as she processed data through her neural interfaces. "Those are harbingers," she announced, her voice carrying an edge that the translation matrices stumbled to convey. "Scout elements of the void. They're here far sooner than we calculated." The tactical display showed 12 entities emerging from the spatial tear. They defied conventional geometry, their forms seeming to fold in on themselves in ways that made several bridge crew members look away in discomfort. As Zixtal watched, nearby stars began to dim, their light somehow being drawn into the impossible shapes of the intruders. "Your weapons," Chen spoke urgently. "They won't be effective. The Harbingers exist partially outside normal spacetime. Conventional energy weapons will pass right through them." She paused, then added, "Let us handle this." Before Zixtal could respond, the Stellaris burst into motion. The massive human vessel covered the distance to the invasion force in seconds, its reality warping drive leaving ripples in spacetime that the collective sensors struggled to process. As it approached the Harbingers, the geometric patterns on its hull began to pulse with increasing intensity. "What you're about to see," Chen explained, her own augmentations glowing brighter, "is why we had to remake ourselves. Traditional warfare isn't possible against the void and its servants. We had to learn to fight on a quantum level." The Stellaris's attack, when it came, was unlike anything in the collective's military archives. The ship didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, the geometric patterns on its hull synchronized into complex, four-dimensional equations. Space itself began to crystallize around the Harbingers, forcing them fully into normal spacetime. "We call it reality anchoring," Chen narrated as the battle unfolded. "You can't fight something that exists outside normal physics unless you first force it to play by the universe's rules." With the Harbingers trapped in normal spacetime, the Stellaris's true capabilities became apparent. Beams of concentrated probability collapsed quantum wave functions around the enemy vessels, causing them to deteriorate as multiple possible states try to exist simultaneously. Where the harbingers had been abstract horrors moments before, they now seemed to shatter like glass, each piece falling through different layers of reality. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. In its wake, the Stellaris hung motionless, its hull patterns slowly returning to their normal configuration. The space where the harbingers had been showed readings that would keep collective scientists busy for decades, areas where probability itself had been permanently altered. That, Chen said into the stunned silence, was just a scouting party. The main force of the void will be far worse. And now, they know we're here. Zixtal found his voice first. How? How did your people even conceive of such weapons? Chen's expression was grim. When we first detected the void, we realized that our understanding of physics was fundamentally flawed. We weren't just fighting an enemy. We were fighting our own limited comprehension of reality. So we rebuilt ourselves, integrated quantum computers into our bodies so we could process calculations that would drive unaugmented minds insane. The Stellaris is the culmination of that transformation, a ship that doesn't just travel through space, but actively rewrites the laws of physics around itself. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just advanced technologically, they had fundamentally changed the way they perceived and interacted with reality itself. The geometric patterns that covered their ships and their bodies weren't decoration or even conventional technology. They were visible manifestations of ongoing calculations that allowed them to manipulate the fabric of space-time. The void will send more, Chen continued. That tear in space-time was their first attempt to establish a foothold in this galaxy. They'll try again, and the next attempt will be stronger. We need to begin preparing immediately. As emergency meetings were called and the collective's military forces were placed on high alert, Zixtal couldn't help but notice how the nearby stars seemed just slightly dimmer than before. The harbingers might have been defeated, but they had left their mark on reality itself. The war that humanity had warned them about was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived on their doorstep. Unity in chaos. The transformation of the eternal vigilance was nothing short of miraculous. In just 3 weeks, human engineers had integrated their quantum computational systems throughout the collective flagship's hull, the geometric patterns spreading like digital ivy across its surface. First Admiral Zixtal watched through the observation deck as his crew worked alongside the humans, ancient barriers between species falling away in the face of necessity. The integration is proceeding faster than expected. Ambassador Chen noted, her augmented eyes tracking the progress of the modifications. Your people learned quickly. Zixtal's crystalline structure shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as a sign of concern. Perhaps too quickly. Some of my crew are already showing signs of neural strain from the quantum interfaces. The human ambassador nodded, her own augmentations pulsing softly. We experienced the same issues during our early transformation. That's why we're not just upgrading your ships, we're helping your people evolve. Throughout the vessel, medical bays had been converted into transformation chambers. Volunteer crew members underwent careful augmentation, their bodies and minds being gradually prepared to handle the computational load necessary to operate the new systems. The process was far more controlled than humanity's own rushed evolution, but no less revolutionary. Report from the Stellaris, Ambassador, a young human technician announced, her thoughts transmitted directly through the ship's new quantum network. The first batch of probability drives is ready for installation across the defense fleet. The numbers were staggering. In less than a month, humanity had begun sharing technologies that would have taken the collective millennia to develop independently. But necessity drove them forward. Long-range sensors showed more spatial tiers appearing at the galaxy's edge. The void was testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses. Sub-Commander Vela entered the observation deck, her newly augmented sensor arrays allowing her to process multiple layers of reality simultaneously. The HiveMind Collective has agreed to join the Alliance, she reported. They're sending their primary neural cluster for integration with the quantum network. That makes 7 major powers now, Chen observed, each bringing unique perspectives and capabilities to the fight. The political landscape of the galaxy had been completely rewritten. Ancient rivalries and territorial disputes had been set aside as species after species recognized the existential threat the void represented. The Stellaris had become a symbol not of fear, but of hope, a blueprint for survival in a universe far stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. In the ship's newly established quantum computing center, representatives from a dozen species worked together, their augmented minds linked through interfaces that would have been impossible mere weeks ago. They weren't just sharing technology. They were sharing consciousness itself, each species contributing its unique way of perceiving reality to create defenses against the void. "We've confirmed another Harbinger signature," one of the linked operators announced, their merged consciousness speaking through multiple voices. Different from the first wave, they're adapting. The tactical display showed the new threat, Harbinger vessels that had evolved to counter the reality anchoring technology demonstrated in the first battle. The void was learning, changing its approach, forcing the allied species to evolve their defenses just as quickly. This was always their pattern, Chen explained, interfacing directly with the quantum network to share humanity's experiences. Each attack tests our responses, probes our capabilities. The void doesn't just consume reality. It learns from it, adapts to it. That's why we need the combined perspectives of all our species to have any hope of survival. Through the quantum network, Zixtal could feel the unique thought patterns of each allied species, the crystalline logic of his own people, the fluid consciousness of the aquatic Merkai, the distributed awareness of the hive mind collective. Humanity's gift of technological integration had created something entirely new, a multi-species neural network that allowed them to perceive and respond to threats across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. "We're tracking quantum distortions in Sector 7, another linked operator reported. Pattern suggests they're testing new ways to breach our spacetime. The Eternal Vigilance's new systems came alive, its hybrid crew working in perfect synchronization through the quantum network. Where once there had been chaos and confusion in the face of the unknown, now there was coordinated response, multiple species thinking and acting as one while maintaining their individual perspectives. "This is what we hoped for," Chen said softly, watching the crew work. Not just sharing technology, but creating something new, something that might actually have a chance against the void. As if to underscore her words, the geometric patterns across the ship's hull pulsed in harmony with the thought patterns of its hybrid crew. The technology was no longer just human, no longer just machine. It had become a true synthesis of multiple species' understanding of reality itself. Through the quantum network, Zixtal could sense more ships being transformed across collective space, more crews being augmented, more minds being linked. They were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a true union of different species and technologies, all focused on a single goal: survival. Dawn of a new era. The void between stars had never been darker. First Admiral Zixtal, his crystalline form now laced with quantum computational matrices, stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance as reality itself seemed to warp and tear at the edges of normal space. The main force of the void had finally arrived. Multiple breaches detected. The unified consciousness of the bridge crew reported through the quantum network. Scale unprecedented. They're attempting to unmake the entire sector simultaneously. Through the vastness of space, thousands of transformed ships held position in a defensive formation that would have been impossible mere months ago. The geometric patterns that had once been unique to the Stellaris now adorned vessels of every species, pulsing in harmony as they calculated probability shifts across multiple dimensions. Ambassador Chen's presence in the quantum network felt different now, tempered by the unique perspectives of a dozen alien species. "This is it." Her thoughts resonated through the linked minds of the fleet. "Everything we've prepared for, everything we've become together." The Void's assault began not with conventional weapons or forces, but with a fundamental attack on reality itself. Space-time began to unravel around the fleet, stars flickering as probability collapsed into chaos. But where such an attack would have once been unstoppable, now it met resistance from minds that could perceive and manipulate the quantum fabric of existence. "Execute Protocol Horizon," Zixtal commanded, his thoughts carrying through the network to every ship in the combined fleet. The geometric patterns across their hulls synchronized, forming a vast lattice of quantum calculations that stretched across the sector. Reality itself seemed to crystallize, reinforced by the combined mathematical precision of multiple species' consciousness. The Stellaris took point position, its massive form now surrounded by an escort of ships from every allied species. Each vessel contributed its unique perspective to the quantum network, allowing them to perceive and respond to the Void's attacks across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. "They're adapting," warned the hive-mind collective's neural cluster, "attempting to bypass our reality anchors through fifth-dimensional space." But this time, they were ready. The transformed fleet didn't just fight back. They rewrote the local laws of physics, creating spaces where the Void's impossible geometry couldn't exist. Humanity's technology, combined with the diverse perspectives of their allies, had created defense systems that operated on principles even the Void couldn't circumvent. Through the quantum network, Zixtal could feel the strain on the combined consciousness of the fleet. They weren't just fighting with weapons or ships. They were fighting with pure mathematics, with the fundamental forces that governed existence itself. Each species contributed its unique understanding. The crystalline logic of his people, the fluid dynamics of the Merkai, the parallel processing of the Hive-Mind Collective, all guided by humanity's mastery of quantum manipulation. The battle unfolded across dimensions that had no names, in spaces that defied conventional understanding. The Void's forces, used to consuming reality unopposed, found themselves faced with a defense that didn't just resist. It rewrote the rules of engagement with each passing moment. "Phase shift detected," the network consciousness reported. "The Void is attempting to alter past probability strings." "Initiate temporal reinforcement," Chen commanded. The geometric patterns across the fleet shifted, creating a cascade of calculated probability that protected not just present spacetime, but the causal chains that had led to this moment. The Void's assault intensified, reality buckling under forces that should have torn the universe apart. But where there had once been separate species, separate understandings of physics, there was now unity. The combined fleet moved as one organism, each ship adding its calculations to a vast equation that defined and defended existence itself. Hours stretched into what felt like eternity as the battle raged across multiple planes of reality. Stars winked out only to be relit as probability was recalculated and reinstated. Space itself became a battlefield of pure mathematics, with the fate of not just this galaxy, but all possible futures hanging in the balance. And then something unprecedented happened. The quantum network, processing the combined insights of every linked species, discovered a pattern in the Void's attacks. Not just a tactical pattern, but a fundamental mathematical flaw in the way it interacted with reality. "All ships," Zixtal broadcast through the network, "execute final protocol." The entire fleet's computational patterns synchronized into a single vast calculation. They weren't just fighting the Void anymore. They were rewriting the fundamental laws that allowed it to exist. The geometric patterns across their hulls became a visual representation of an equation that encompassed every species' understanding of reality. The Void's forces began to collapse, not from external attack, but from internal contradiction. The combined fleet had found a way to make their very existence mathematically impossible in normal spacetime. Where they had been abstract horrors of impossible geometry, they became nothing more than failed calculations, equations that couldn't resolve. As the last traces of the Void vanished from normal space, the quantum network hummed with the shared consciousness of victory. But it was more than just a military triumph. It was proof that the combined perspectives of different species could achieve what none could do alone. This is only the beginning. Chen's thoughts echoed through the network. We've done more than defeat an enemy. We've proven that the next step in evolution is unity. The geometric patterns across the fleet pulsed one final time in perfect harmony, a symbol of a new era in galactic history. They had faced the impossible and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The boundaries between species, between organic and technological, between different understandings of reality itself, had been forever broken down. In the aftermath of the battle, as stars burned bright and unchanged in space that had almost been unmade, the combined fleet hung in formation around the Stellaris. They were no longer separate species allied against a common threat. They had become something entirely new, something that could face whatever other impossibilities the universe might hold.